Welcome to the Scarlet, Blue, and You podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Lauren Youse, your Scarlet, Blue, and You host, and the HLGU Alumni Director. I'm coming to you from our beautiful Burt studio on the HLGU campus, and I am going to be honest, this is one of my favorite podcasts of the year. We've done it, I think this is our 4th year. It's the Burt Youse Book List for 2024. Woo! So we can't have that without Mrs. Katherine Burt. Welcome back, Mrs. Burt.
Thank you very much. And this is one of my favorite podcasts, too, and also the only one I ever do, so thank you.
Now, you came on to talk about Amanda's book.
That's true.
Because you edited
that is true.
Amanda Henry's book. Mm-hmm. But you're right. This is kind of where you shine.
This is, well, I don't know about that, but thank you so much.
So,
it's
so Mrs. Burt is a former First Lady, and I'm very excited to welcome our current First Lady, Mrs. Jessica Matz. Welcome.
Thank you. I was so excited to get this invitation.
Yes, because I think within 5 minutes of meeting each other, we talked about books.
It's true.
So
I met
natural.
you in the library, and
that sounds about right.
I was so excited.
Yes. It's like, ooh, bonding. Yeah, so this is great. So it's me and First Ladies. HLG royalty. I love it. Okay. So you're both great readers. Let's talk some books. It's a new year, so maybe our listeners have come up with a resolution to read more than they did the previous year. So we are here to help you. We read a lot between the three of us, and we've come up with books that we think are pretty much friendly for most readers. Mm-hmm. Okay, fair to say?
Yes.
All right. So, Mrs. Burt, would you like to start?
I would like to start. Thank you very much. I always like to include a classic in this. So the one I've chosen this time is a wonderful book by Willa Cather, an American author, My Antonia. And it was published a long time ago, over 100 years ago in 1918. I have to say, this is one of my favorite books. Do I say that every
World
time?
War I?
It's always my favorite
World
book.
War One-ish.
This is when it was
written.
It was published during the time of, the ending part of World
I've heard
War
of this book, but I have not. I have no idea what it's about.
Well, this is a wonderful book. I will start off by saying this is not a love story, but it's a friendship story. And it's a beautiful one. I do love this book, one of my all-time favorites. I think the reason I like it so well is that this is really well done prose. Willa Cather writes like no one else. There's so much warmth in her stories, so much character development. The plots are always secondary, but the plots are interesting too, and this book is no exception. This is a coming-of-age story, beginning with a boy whose name is Jim Burden, who's 10 years old at the outset and coming out to Nebraska to live with his grandparents after both of his parents have died within a short time. Along with Jim, this is the story of Antonia Shimerda, who is a few years older, maybe 2 to 3 years older. And she's a person who's an immigrant from the Eastern European countries. It's not clear. I think she may have been from the former Czechoslovakia, but she came with a large group of immigrants out to Nebraska where the life was very hard, difficult land. They're out there on the prairie, and it's very difficult. The story takes place in the latter part of the 19th and early part of the 20th centuries. So as I said, this is primarily a story of friendship between this boy and girl as they grow into adulthood. And the story takes us from the time Jim is 10 until the time he's in his 40s.
Ooh, I love those kind of
So
books.
they've gotten to know each other quite well. But it's a challenging story because the life for those immigrants was very difficult. Many, including her father, had a difficult time adjusting to living in America. He had been a very cultured man back in Europe, and here in America, he's kind of a farmer and a person whose life is entirely different, and he does not deal with it well. So there are lots of tragedies that take place in the story, but also it's a very inspiring account of these brave Eastern European immigrants who found a way to make a life. And it's an interesting observation that Jim has during his growing up years, that these people who are farmers, just, hands dirty all the time, in the next generation, their children are going to be the bankers and the doctors because they've taught them an incredible work ethic and also emphasized the importance of education. In addition to the main plot about Jim and Antonia, Willa Cather weaves an interesting bunch of characters, American pioneers and Bohemian immigrants, into these stories. The challenges and achievements, the hardships, the adventures of these unique characters, plus the skillful, beautiful way that Willa Cather weaves a story, make this an intriguing and heartwarming and enjoyable American classic.
Well, I'm going to have to put that on my list.
Going
Please
on my
do.
list too.
Well, good. It's a good book. In fact, anything written by Willa Cather is very much worth
Good
reading.
to know. Always looking for new authors.
Okay. Well, good. And she's the writer of several classics, including O Pioneers and
I've heard of that one.
there's another one, The Death Comes for the Professor. So, yeah, I haven't read that one, but
That
it's on the
sounds like
list
something
too.
you may not want to read.
Maybe not. Well, after you hear my others, never mind. Okay.
Okay, well, keep going.
Oh, another book?
Let's do it.
All of them?
Unless if you want to pass along.
Why don't
it's
we
totally-
pass it on to Jessica?
All right.
Okay.
Do one of yours?
Sure. My first book was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. It was published in 2020. I see you all nodding your heads. Have you
I've read
also
it.
read it?
I've looked for it, but no.
Okay. So the book is such an interesting read. I'm going to try not to spoil it. It starts out and it seems like it's going to be pretty depressing.
It does.
And so my encouragement when you pick up the book is keep going. Mm-hmm. It then takes a little bit of a fantastical leap. Keep going.
Yeah.
So the author is setting up a stage to explore a theme that I've rarely seen explored in books, and that is the choices we make and the choices we don't make, and how in our mind we process the road we did not take.
It's
So-
a really fun read.
It made me think of there's a scene in Prince Caspian. C.S. Lewis, Aslan, the lion, is talking to Lucy at the end, and she regrets this decision she's made. And she says, what if we had done something else? Could you tell me what would have happened? And he said that, I'm paraphrasing here. No, nobody has ever told that. However, this book, it is going to tell.
that.
It explores that, and I think reveals some pretty important truths. It prompted some self-reflection.
It's a really unique book.
It is. It is. The title did not give away what was going to happen, nor did the first few chapters. Mm-hmm. And then once I hit about chapter 4, I don't think I set it down until I finished it.
Yeah, but you're right. It does seem rather depressing at the
It
beginning.
does. Which serves a purpose.
Yes.
That sounds really fascinating. I'm glad it's already on my list, and if it were not, it would be now. So thank you.
Okay. Well, you want me to go ahead and share my first book? Okay. So last year, I didn't realize I had a theme until I put them all together and realized I had an animal theme. No theme this year. So I just want to say that, just in case people are like, she's going to recommend 5 more animal books. I'm not going to do that this year. My first book is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. And I think, Jessica, you've read this one.
I did. I read it over the summer.
Okay, so when Ryland Grace awakens from a coma, he discovers he's on a spaceship. And he doesn't know why or how. In fact, he can't even remember his own name for a little while. It comes to him. But checking his surroundings, he quickly determines he's alone because his 2 other crew members did not come out of their comas. And he's like, this is no good. I'm in space by myself. So figuring he has nothing but time, he sets about investigating his surroundings in the hopes of determining his purpose for being there. And his memories start slowly returning. He starts to understand the importance and the improbability of his task. He's on a solo mission to save Earth from an extinction-level event. Therefore, Project Hail Mary. Oh. Yeah, and so no pressure. Poor guy. He's up there all by himself. So the clock is ticking down. The nearest human is literally light years away, and he's got to do it all alone. Or does he? Bum, bum, bum.
Ooh.
Now you're really intrigued, right?
Absolutely.
So
my.
it's an incredibly well-written, fast-paced, clever, hilarious book. I loved Ryland's character so much. He's very analytical because he is an astronaut scientist, yet very humorous. It's just a great book. I highly recommend it. Even if you don't love science fiction, I think you would enjoy this book. So I really liked it.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, the author is the one who also did The Martian, which they made into a pretty famous movie a few years back.
Yes.
But this is another one of his books, so it's really good.
Do you think it's worthy of being made into a movie?
Oh, I think it'd make a fun movie.
Ooh.
It'd be a challenging movie. The main lead would need to be strong because there's going to be a lot of solo scenes.
Yes, yeah. It would. There'd only be like a handful of people in the cast.
Wow.
Because he is up in space by himself.
By himself.
Yeah.
Or is he?
Or is he? Bum, bum, bum.
Will you do sound effects for the rest of mine, please?
You just
awesome.
give me and our sound tech, Mrs. Sabrina Berkshire, says she's got buttons.
She can do anything.
You just kind of indicate if you need like the fairy sound.
Oh. Well, I might need some different ones for the next book that I'm going to do. Maybe
machine gun. Do you have like machine guns?
Machine guns and bombs. So, okay. You may recall that I talked about The Warsaw Orphan by Kelly Rimmer last time. Well, I enjoyed her writing so much that I picked up another of her books. And this one is very recent. It was published in 2023, and it's called The Paris Agent.
You have me at Paris and Agent and probably World War II.
Okay, absolutely. Kelly Rimmer is an Australian author, and she has written some books that have really taken off. Her works have been published into more than 20 languages. She's a very skillful author, I must say. So, just like The Warsaw Orphan, this novel takes place during the Second World War. I'm going to describe it at the beginning as a story of sacrifice, courage, and the effect that the past has on the present. One of the other books I'm going to review has a heavy emphasis on the impact of the past on the present as well, but this one certainly does. In fact, that's at the heart of the story. It centers around 3 members of a British organization during Second World War, of which I had never heard. It's called the Special Operations Executive, the SOE, which is a spy agency.
Nice.
I'd never heard of it, but it's a real thing. This is another thing about Kelly Rimmer's books. She does extensive research for her novels. So if she's telling you some things, you can know that they have a basis in fact. Of these 3 SOE agents, 2 are women and 1's a man. They're all in their 20s, and they have all had minimal training for the jobs they have to do. Yeah, perfect. Basically, about 3 months.
Oh, gosh.
So, I mean, minimal to do all kinds of things, encryption, code breaking, hiding their identity, many, many things, physical combat, all sorts of things. So they're being sent from London, where they're based, into occupied France, and this is taking place in late 1943 and 44. They're going to be working with the French resistance, which in different places is either weak or strong, depending on what's happened to them recently. Their real names are Eloise and Josie, and the man's name is Noah, although code names, and in some cases multiple code names, are used throughout the novel, which makes it really fun to know if you're talking about Eloise or Fleur.
So you might need to make yourself a little card.
I did. Reading through it, I did. Josie is sometimes called Chloe, and then at other times she's called other names, but lots of different names. And their story is told in an interesting way, not in chronological order.
Oh, no, that's boring.
And exactly. And I have another one that's even more so. But in chapters that cover periods of time in 1943, 1944, and much later after the war is over in 1960.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, I love that.
I just have to say it's a wonderful book. I really enjoyed it up until the end, and then I won't talk about that.
We're not talking about that.
Nope.
People have to find out for themselves.
They do. The narrators are Eloise and Josie, the women agents in the 1940s, and the one in 1960 is the daughter, the young adult daughter of the man who was a special agent, Noah. And her name is Charlotte. The 1940s chapters detail the events taking place during the dangerous spy work of Eloise and Josie in France in the months just before the Normandy invasion. The 1960 chapters are narrated by Noah's young adult daughter, Charlotte, long after the war, as Noah is struggling to put together the pieces of his shattered memories. Before the war was over, just before the war was over, he was shot and he also had a traumatic brain injury, head injury, from being in a car wreck.
Oh, geez.
Most of the details of which he does not remember. He's left with fragmentary memories, fragmentary scenes that he sees but does not know how to interpret, and a deep feeling of regret. But he doesn't know why.
Oh, gosh.
He doesn't know what he is regretting. I will call this a gripping, complex espionage plot, but it also is a story of love, incredible sacrifice, and the courage it takes not only to do dangerous work, but also to face the memories of it later on. It also deals with the atrocities, the horrific atrocities that the Nazis committed during that time period. And I think this is an important aspect of that book, especially right now, today, in this day and time, because this is what's in the headlines every single day, the atrocities that are being committed in this world by people who don't care about human life. It was an emotional read. I have
It
to
sounds
say.
like sounds like maybe something you don't want to take on your vacation to the beach.
Not a beach read, I would say, not a beach read, but it is a really good book.
Okay.
As I've said already, she's a wonderful writer. She makes you feel that you are there and that you know those characters. So I've been to the war. So
It sounds like you have, man. All right. Do you have another for us, Jessica?
I do. My next recommendation is Demon Copperhead. It's by Barbara Kingsolver. And Barbara Kingsolver is an author that I really enjoy. I knew this book was coming out because I tend to follow her and, assume the next book she releases I'm going to want to read. But it came out, and between the title and the scary pictures on the cover and the size, I didn't read it right away. And then it won the Pulitzer for Fiction for 2023. And that was the tipping point when I thought, okay, I'm going to pick this up and see. So it was my Thanksgiving read. It is a retelling of Dickens' David Copperfield, which I am sure you have read, Mrs. Burt, but I have not. And the fact that I had not was a little intimidating. You can read the book without having read David Copperfield, and it is still a worthy read. And if you pick it up, I'll be interested to hear what more you can take from it if you've read both. It is set in southern Appalachia in a timeline that roughly parallels my own, and I did grow up in southern Appalachia.
Oh, fun.
And so it is realistic fiction through and through. Her characters are not real, but her places are. And so they hike through the mountains, places I hiked, and eat at restaurants where I had eaten.
Fun.
So that was kind of wild, but like Dickens, Kingsolver is writing, hoping that a narrative will prompt reflection and change in society in a way that statistics alone don't. So the caveat I want to put with this recommendation is I think it is a important read, but she is very realistic in terms of some violence, some addiction, some language, and the tragedy that can go along with some of these subject matters. So that would be my caution.
Sure. Just like a World War II book. You're probably not going to come out there with all your characters and probably not going to, You're just going to experience some stuff because that was life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it sounds, the cover does look scary.
It does. And the name...
Demon.
When you learn where their name comes from, I'm going to say it's not nearly as scary as the title sounds.
Yeah. Now, when you said that was one of your books, I was like, okay. All right. Well, my next book also has a title that doesn't sound very nice either. It's The Thursday Murder Club by Richard Osman. So there you go.
As long as it's a club.
It's a club. I mean, they're not murderers.
Right.
They're a murder club. Yes. And so this one's really fun. So in a peaceful retirement village, 4 unlikely friends meet up once a week to investigate unsolved murders. And one of the really funny things is that they call themselves, I don't know, it's like underwater basket weaving or something to discourage anyone from crashing. But they have to reserve the space in the nursing home. So they have to call it something. But they're just like, no, nobody else is welcome. It's just our club. All right. But then a brutal murder actually takes place on their very doorstep, and the Thursday Murder Club finds themselves in the middle of their first real-life case. Elizabeth, Joyce, Ibrahim, and Ron might be pushing 80, but they still have a few tricks up their sleeves. And so can our unorthodox but brilliant gang catch the killer before it's too late? So that's kind of the setup.
Ooh.
It's really fun. And you come in when they're in their 80s, but the book slowly reveals their backgrounds and how these backgrounds are helping them solve these cases. So it's really fun. It's a great story. What I enjoyed most were the characters. It's great, subtle, and not so subtle British humor. Some big plot twists and turns, and of course, murder cases, which are so fun to read about. And bonus, it's book 1 of a series.
Oh,
so you get to know the characters.
Did you read more in the series?
I've read book 2 and thoroughly enjoyed it. Now, I have a very good friend who's also a great reader who only gave this book 2 out of 5 stars. She thought it was a snoozer. So maybe it's not for everyone. I really liked it. So just going to send that caveat out there. Maybe it's a little too subtle.
Violence in it or not?
There is some. Yeah, it's murder.
Well, so we actually get details of the
like there's a little, and like there's some thrilling parts.
Okay.
And, yeah. It's not all nursing home drama. Like did somebody not get pushed up to the table, or someone lost their blanket.
Oh, that's good.
It's way fun, and it takes place in Britain, which makes it even more
Following
fun.
up with Jessica's question, is that a beach read?
I think it could be. It could be more of a beach read because it has a lot of humor.
Well,
is your next one a beach read?
I actually think it is. But,
yes.
I don't know why all these books I have this time are kind of serious, except for one.
Sometimes it just happens that way.
Or 2.
Or they're all about animals.
No animals in this one, sorry. So the next one I'd like to talk about is John Grisham's newest novel, published in 2023, The Exchange. This is an exciting book with surprises around every corner, and you quickly go from the mundane to the suspenseful, if not on every page, at least from chapter to chapter. So it's really has a lot of action in this book.
I do too.
It's good. This is the sequel to his early hit novel, The Firm. Have you read The Firm?
I have.
It's been years.
Yeah, me too. But I'll never forget it. My parents read it just before I did, and we talked about it for months. And my dad said that every time he went to the grocery store.
Was that one of his first books?
Yeah, it was not the first. I think A Time to Kill
it was
came
early.
before. It was very early.
Okay.
But I talked about it with my parents, and my dad said after he had been watching or reading about Mitch McDear spending thousands of dollars, he would go to the grocery store and think, "Oh, I can, I'll buy that."
Make it rain.
Yeah, make it rain. Exactly. So if you've read The Firm, you know a little bit of the backstory of Mitch McDear. So this takes place 15 years after the close of The Firm. So it's supposed to be now 2005. And in this book, we find that he has, as he did at the end of The Firm, left that crooked law firm in Memphis. He's quit the law profession and left the country.
Oh, gosh.
With his wife. So that was the way that ended. And so we find out what he and his wife, Abby, have been doing in the meantime. They lived for a while in the Cayman Islands, for a few years in Italy, and then for a while in London, England. And now they're living in the Upper West Side of New York City, with their twin sons, which were not in the other book, Carter and Clark. And Mitch finally has returned to law practice, even though he was terribly disillusioned at the end of The Firm. This time he's working with the largest law firm in the world. It's called Scully and Pershing.
He just doesn't go small.
Pardon?
He is a guy who doesn't go small, does he?
He never goes small. You're right. And even more so as this book goes on. The focus of the story is to free a fellow attorney. It's a woman who's a member of the same law firm, Scully and Pershing, but she works in the London office. This unfortunate woman, who is of Italian origin, Giovanna Sandoni, has been taken hostage by a Middle East terrorist group. And Muammar Gaddafi is in this, too.
Oh, my goodness.
He's the opponent of the terrorist group. They hate him, and they want to bring him down. But at any rate, that's what it involves. So you have this Middle Eastern terrorist group. They're demanding $100 million as ransom for poor Giovanna Sandoni. And the plot follows Mitch's desperate attempt to raise that insane amount of money to save Giovanna's life. Not only does Mitch get involved, also his wife is involved as well. Abby is deeply involved in trying to make this transfer of money and the rescue of Giovanna. If you read The Firm, you followed Mitch McDear from Memphis to Destin and many points in between. And there was lots of photocopying of documents and laundering of money, all of that. Well, this novel tops that. Not only does he travel within the United States, here he goes to many more places, to Rome, to London, to the Cayman Islands, to Tripoli in Libya, and back to New York multiple times. In fact, at one point in the novel, he is almost always getting onto or getting off a plane because, again, he's frantic trying to raise this money. So if you like a well-crafted, complex, fast-paced, suspenseful book, I think you would really enjoy The Exchange by John Grisham.
Sounds fun. Sounds different.
Like Grisham's always a winner.
It's always a winner. You're right.
Jessica and I read, did you read his little short stories about Jake Brigance?
No.
They're short. They're like just when the meat starts to happen in the story.
They're short and they don't conclude. It was unexpected.
They don't conclude.
Not
but
quite.
even those I enjoyed. And I feel like we got half a story.
Yeah. Have you read A Painted House?
Yes.
Did you read that one? Oh.
Yeah.
I
I
like
read
that one.
most of his stuff.
Yeah.
And
It's all
I
good.
enjoy most of it. There's been a few exceptions, but that's probably to be expected.
You know, I think he could retire if he wanted to,
Yeah.
but he keeps
He just
turning them
keeps-
out, and they're all good, and they
They
all make the
are.
#1 New York Times bestseller list.
Okay.
All right.
You got another one?
I do. My next recommendation's a bit different. It's middle grade fiction. I, as an adult, love middle grade fiction. I will read them happily on my own. My kids are 10, 12, and 14, and this is one we happened to read aloud. We normally have a read aloud going. It was a read aloud for this year. The title is A Place to Hang the Moon. The author is Kate Albus. She was a new author to me. I think I got the recommendation, Read Aloud Revival. She has an Instagram that I follow.
Nice.
Great recommendations, and that's where I got the recommendation from. Like several of these other books, it's World War II. Yes. Uses Operation Pied Piper to get the story going. So that's, London is going to be bombed, and so they're needing to move all the children out to a rural area. So same as Lion, the Witch, and the
terrible
Wardrobe.
name, though, for that operation.
Yes.
Because in the tale, those kids die.
Yes, but very useful for getting a plot going.
Yeah.
So these children have arrived in a country home they do not know. It is a look at World War II, but not through the battle. It's what's happening back home. And in psychology, we talk about the transformational power of having one person who's in your court. That for a child, that is huge. Sometimes, often, that person is a parent, but sometimes it's not. And that is really a theme this book explores, which is a part as an adult, what made this book really stand out. So you have these children who are in a situation where there doesn't seem to be much hope, and the power of somebody to step in who believes that maybe they hung the moon.
And that's sweet.
Does every child deserve to believe that there's somebody out there who thinks he or she hung the moon?
Oh,
Yeah.
True.
it's on my list. It sounds adorable. I love it.
I read somewhere and agreed 100% that a well-written children's book or middle years book should be enjoyable by adults.
Absolutely.
That can be, and I think that's very true. I can think of so many middle school, high school books that I just embrace because they're wonderfully written.
C.S. Lewis has a great quote, I'm paraphrasing, where he says something along the lines of, why would we ask children to read the books that are not good enough for us to also read them as adults?
So true.
Very
That's a
true.
great
Yeah.
quote, yes.
No, for a while there, I was just tired of violence and smut and language, and I just solely read middle school,
There's a
elementary
promise
books.
in the middle grade book
Yeah.
that there's going to be hope.
That's true.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it was a nice little break from other World War II books. All right, so my next book is called Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, and I have read quite a few of Miss Reid's books, and I really like them all. I would not recommend them all because some of the themes, some of the things that happen are just not to everyone's taste. Like they're a little more liberal. They're a little more like that. But this one is about tennis, and I always have a book that I walk to, and this one made my heart rate like go so high. Like I got so many more steps in by this book because it just keeps going. Okay, so by the time that Carrie retires from tennis, she's the best player in the world. She's shattered every record and claimed 20 slam titles. She's sacrificed everything to be the best, and her dad is her coach. Okay, but 6 years after her retirement, she finds herself sitting in the stands of the 1994 U.S. Open, watching her record be taken from her by a brutal, stunning British player named Nikki Chan. So she is not having this. So at the age of 37 years old, Carrie makes the monumental decision to come out of retirement and be coached by her father for one last year in an attempt to reclaim her record. So in spite of it all, Carrie Soto is back for one epic final season. In this riveting and unforgettable novel, the author tells a story about the cost of greatness and a legendary athlete attempting a comeback. I do not love sport books. Like, I can get behind a good, like, horse racing book because there's horses. But they are not my genre.
What about cat racing?
Cat racing would be amazing.
And we
should write that together.
That, yes.
Yes, but I loved this book. It was exciting, engaging, adrenaline pumping, and very entertaining. Even if you don't like tennis, I think this book would be for you because it really does a great job of explaining the basic rules of tennis. Each chapter keeps you on your toes. You feel like you're actually at the matches, watching the games play out. And you jump up and down, you scream, you cross your fingers, and you really just want Carrie to win. So it's such a fun book. I totally recommend it.
Oh, that sounds wonderful.
There is some language.
So, Lauren, I feel like audiobooks can be a mixed bag. Sometimes it really elevates the book. You listened to this one as an audiobook?
I did, because when I walk, yes, I listen to it.
So it's a good exercise read. Mm-hmm. Listen.
It really was. Like, and I've listened to like British novels too. They are not good exercise.
Oh no.
I just was like, my heart rate's only 100. We gotta move this up, guys.
Oh wow. Does it make you want to have a nap instead?
A little bit. Yeah, like
little hot tea and
exactly.
Scones.
Cozy into a chair.
Yep.
Let the rain come. No, this was the opposite. Perfect. This was like she's running in the sand and you're like, oh, I can dig in and go faster and hit the ball harder. It was so fun. Such a great book.
Well, my next one is called Anxious People. And you know who the author is.
I've read this.
Yes.
Have we all read this one?
Yes.
Okay.
He's an author I follow.
Oh, I love him.
It's a favorite.
I want to turn the mics off and just talk with you all about this book before I give you my take on it. You notice that I have notes here, and I'm just about going to read straight from these notes because to describe this book
it's so fun.
It's very difficult, but I loved it. I just loved it. And at first I thought, what is he doing in this book? Especially
you're so confused at the beginning.
That early chapter, he said, "There's a man standing on a bridge." Now, forget about that for a while. Don't think about that now.
Yeah.
And he said, "I know that's all you can think about now. Just
he doesn't
just
even
the man
use
on the bridge."
character names for like the first few chapters.
For people to know you're supposed to be confused.
Yeah.
Like keep going.
Yeah. The anxiety's real.
So after the first 3 chapters, I thought, that Lauren Youse, she has made me read Frederick Bachman before and made me think that based on A Man Called Uwe, it was going to be, a picnic. Fantastic. But you may remember that I also wanted to throw that book against the wall after the first chapter, after being introduced to that grumpy old man that we all love by, a few chapters in. Just so wonderful. Well, that was the same experience with this. After I got into seeing a bit of what he was doing, I thought, oh, what a clever way to tell a story and what a clever story. So I found this novel absorbing. I mean, for me, this was really a page turner. I could not put it down once I got through the beginning. It was funny. Mm-hmm. It was tragic. And it was heartwarming. Mm-hmm. And I would read it again in a heartbeat and probably will very soon. Like The Paris Agent, the World War II book, it deals with the effect of the past on the present. But a great theme in it is that we are all interconnected in ways that we barely can fathom. And I was thinking about that in terms of real life. I thought, I wonder if, especially as I got to the end, I wonder if I'm that interconnected with Lauren. And I thought, how are we interconnected? I taught her in a class. I live in the same neighborhood with her parents. We both love to read, and I've done podcasts with her. And then I thought, Jessica, I have not known very long, but we have lived in the same house.
It's true.
The very same house. And our husbands have done the same job, and we both love to read. And there are probably other similarities as well that we don't know about. So this is the author who wrote A Man Called Uwe that was made into the movie A Man Called Otto. At the beginning, I found this a challenge to read. And why would that be? Chapter by chapter, it's told on different days as well as different years. And many different points of view are used in this book, even to narrate the same scene, which we get sometimes over and over.
And I kind of liked that.
Well, it gives you new perspectives about the whole thing. So this is not your basic, straightforward narrative. But as you say, what would be the fun in that? With a multitude of quirky, interesting characters, I can't even describe them, and events that are often not what you think they are. It's a difficult book to describe without telling the whole plot. And you know I have a tendency to want to tell the entire story from beginning to end and us all laugh about it, but I will restrain myself from that. Among the characters are two policemen who happen to be father and son, both of whom basically want to save the world. A gentle, peaceful soul who plans to rob a bank. And, of course, that is the beginning absurdity in it all. A man wearing the head from a rabbit costume.
Always fun.
A psychologist. An 87-year-old woman who may not be what she appears to be. A group of strangers who are connected in ways they could never predict. And the most hilarious hostage situation ever. At a few points in the book, the author actually tells us what the book is about. But later he has to revise that. Early in the novel, he simply says, this book is about idiots, which we soon learn means human beings.
Yeah.
All of us. But later he says, this book is about idiots, a bank robbery, an apartment viewing, a hostage situation, and love. And he is so right. Indeed, it is about love, with huge doses of kindness, forgiveness, and understanding mixed in.
Yeah. I really liked it. It's not my favorite Frederick Backman, but it's close to the top.
Well, I was a little afraid to read it because you had told me early on, in fact, when you first told me about Uwe, that you had not liked his other books or some of his other books. My grandmother asked me to tell you
that one is
she's
not
sorry.
my favorite.
Okay, I've not read that.
It's good. It's
Is
just
it?
not. When you come to think that he's going to produce, 5 stars every time. So then when it's like a
that's what you
4.5
expect.
star, you're like, oh, it was a 4.5 star.
Well, in my mind, this was a number one, and it was a number one best-selling on the New York Times list. So it's well worth it.
It's really fun how it unfolds.
Oh, it is.
Because you don't see it coming. I didn't.
I was in the middle of the book before I realized one very important detail that every character in there knew that we did not.
Yeah.
Which was a very interesting.
I'm interested to hear you say you might read it a second time. I only read it once. That second read would feel pretty different.
Yeah, because you know stuff.
Because you know
But
so
I'm
many
sure
things.
you've forgotten stuff, too.
Probably, certainly.
What I liked one of the many things I liked in Uwe was the way Bachman slowly peeled the onion. You get details here and there very slowly, but it all adds up to a wonderful picture. So.
No, it's a good read. It's good for the list.
Absolutely.
All right.
Okay. My fourth recommendation is nonfiction.
Good for you.
Yes. It came out in 2019, written by Justin Earley, and the book title is The Common Rule, Habits of Purpose for an Age of Distraction. So the title, common, there means community. So he envisions these rules, these practices being communal. And his thesis is that while through hopefully purpose, but often accident, we think we form our habits, but ultimately our habits form us. He uses the analogy that our habits are the liturgy of our lives, and they are forming us, and says, just like water is invisible to a fish, too often our habits are invisible to us. And so he really simplifies into 8 habits for our daily, for our weekly, that can have a pretty transformational power in stewarding our time in a way that becomes passive because they have become habits. I did read the book and I had the thought, this is a busy season. I'll start implementing this in a different time. At which point I read the paragraph where he says, a busy time is the best time to start because you need to find margin in your life. So so I started.
It's like he was reading your mind.
He was. He knew what I was thinking. It is grounded in scripture, grounded in ideas of Christian community, gospel messages through it. I did read it individually, and it was powerful, and I have found maybe 3 of the 8 habits have a strong hold. In the book, it talks about, it has a guide for working through communally, and one of my hopes in this next year is to rope some people into the adventure of what working through this book together. I'd be interested to see what element that adds because certainly he, as the author, believes that's
kind of some accountability, maybe, or
someone you can at least talk to. And discussion, and maybe honestly say this, this thing where I'm supposed to not look at my phone in the morning until I've, read scripture and done other things, and then I look at my phone is shockingly difficult, but once it becomes a habit, once we're not thinking about it, it's steering our day in a different direction.
I like that.
Yeah. It prompted me to buy a real alarm clock so that my phone could go into another room.
Yeah. That's very smart.
Yeah, it was take away the temptation.
$12 at Walmart that had a tremendous impact.
They're probably excited. Oh, wow. They're like, somebody bought an alarm clock.
It's been years.
It's dusty on the box.
Off the shelf. Yeah.
Fun. Okay.
That sounds like a really interesting premise.
It is. It's a good read.
Good to have some nonfiction on the list, for sure. All right. My next book is very much fiction, but it is my World War II book because, can't not recommend at least one. So this is my World War II book. It's called The Rose Code by Kate Quinn. It's kind of spies and espionage as well. So in The Rose Code, we have 2 shifting timelines, 1947 and another one starting around 1939. So about 10 years apart. In 1947, we find Osla, this beautiful debutante type person, preparing for the royal wedding between Prince Philip and Queen Elizabeth, which is way fun. Just that part right there. And in the other timeline, we meet 3 women, Beth, Osla, same person, and Mab. And they work at Bletchley Park, and they are code breakers during World War II. So we observe how 3 women's fates are intercepted, how their friendship blooms, and when a decoded message reveals treason and sensitive information is shared with the wrong people, one of them even finds themselves locked up in an asylum, waiting for the truth to come out. So mystery keeps you drawn into the story. You sit on the edge of your seat, squirming, biting your fingernails, turning the pages faster and faster to find out what happens next. It's way good. I loved it. It's a big book. Like, it's a commitment.
Okay.
But sometimes I love a big book.
Yeah.
If the author can do something with it, I don't mind if there's extra pages.
Do you ever find yourself reading more slowly as you come to the end of a book that you've enjoyed?
I did that with
Because
the last Harry Potter book. I was like, there's only 30 pages left.
Every now and then, I actually flip and read the ending.
You do not.
So that I can slow down and savor that last 100 pages without tearing through them. I do every now and then. Because otherwise,
you're like
how fast
not really reading.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's really a tribute to the author because
absolutely.
you're enjoying
They have achieved their
and savoring that part of
purpose.
the book.
Yeah,
Yes.
and this is one of those books.
Oh, wow.
There's so much mystery, and you're just this whole treason thing just really gets you,
Oh, wow.
and it just keeps jumping from time to time, and it's real fun.
There was a little bit of treason in my World War II book, too, but I don't want to talk about that.
Okay, we're not talking about that.
Well, I will talk about a nonfiction book, too. And this is one that was published in 2012, but I didn't hear about it until last year when my daughter recommended it to me. So I read it. It's called Running for My Life, and it's by Lopez Lomong, a young man from the Sudan. His birth name was Lopepe Lomong, but later it changed to Lopez.
Lopepe.
So this is a really inspiring book. I enjoyed it. I flew through it because, again, it was a page-turner. I wanted to know what happened to this boy. Lopez Lomong was one of the lost boys of Sudan. And he tells of his life from the age of 6 to around 40. And it is a truly remarkable story. At 6 years old, he was abducted while he was at an outdoor church service with his parents, and he was literally ripped from his parents' arms, and they tried everything they could to protect him and keep these rebels, these Sudanese rebels, from taking him. But they took him and all the other children that were boys in this church service.
Wow.
They took them to a prison camp that was far away, didn't let them see where they were going. At this camp, they were poorly fed and harshly treated, with the older boys being trained to be Sudanese soldiers, Sudanese rebel soldiers. The amazing thing about this book is that even at 6 years old, little Lopez Lomong was able to cope with all of this, the loss of his parents, of everything familiar to him, and this terrible treatment, and even find some positives in what was going on, even as a child. He says that he always felt that God was with him in every moment. 3 older boys befriended him while he was in this camp, and when they decided that they were going to escape, they took him along on this brave adventure, and it saved his life, most likely. Lomar always called those 3 boys his angels, not just because they were kind to him and helped him escape, but also because they vanished in thin air within just a few days after their escape. A little bit later, he was captured again, but this time he was taken to a UN refugee camp, which was not ideal. But it was still better than what he had. In this camp, he still lived under primitive conditions, without enough food, but nevertheless, he found positives, including the opportunity to play soccer. He was just a kid. He loved to play. But before the boys could play soccer, each one was required to run a long distance, all the way around the field and back many, many times, waiting for the other kids, and there were many kids in this camp, waiting for the other kids to finish using the field. And then he did that. So it was in this running that he found the key to his future. I would love to tell you the rest of his story, but I'll stop here. I will say that his life turned out far, far differently than anyone could ever have predicted. And he felt that God had led his steps all the way. This is a joyful read. I loved it all, and I recommend it to you.
That sounds great. Okay, I'll put that nonfiction on my list.
Okay, absolutely.
To you, Lauren, I believe.
Okay. So my next book is also a John Grisham book. Look, John is on the list twice this year. Good for you, John. So it's called The Guardians, and this one's a little different, kind of like yours is a little different. So Cullen Post is a former lawyer turned pastor turned lawyer again. He works in Savannah at a nonprofit, Guardian Ministries. The primary case that Cullen is working on is for Quincy Miller, a black man tried and convicted of murder of a lawyer, Keith Russo, in a small town in Florida. He's served more than 20 years in prison already, but still maintains that he's innocent. Cullen works diligently to investigate how Quincy was framed, why key witnesses in the trial lied, and who is behind this shady group and setup. So this book has a legal and dramatic hallmarks of a strong Grisham novel. I was drawn to Cullen Post immediately and quickly caught up in Quincy's case and the world of Guardian Ministries. It's very exciting because they're always doing these innocent projects. So there are lots of twists and turns and surprises as Post works to free Quincy. I loved the details that Grisham's novels throw in, plus the peeks in the courtroom, tidbits about examining evidence, and so much more. It's a really powerful read that gives you plenty to think about, as I think all Innocent Project books do. So it's definitely worth a read. It was very fun.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah, it was good. Yep. I liked it a lot. Do you have one more?
I do.
Okay.
You want me to do this one too? I'm not even going to look at the sheet on this one. This is another book recommended to me by a daughter. So the Running for Your Life was by Laura, and the next one was recommended by Jennifer, our youngest child. This is a novel published in 2021 by Leanne Moriarty, who is another Australian author. So I guess I'm on a streak of Australian authors here at this point. And I'll probably talk the least about this one. And the reason I'm going to talk the least about this one is that you can see it for yourself on an NBC miniseries that's coming up in March.
Oh.
So Leanne Moriarty had hardly written this book when, and she already had many, I think this may be her 9th novel. She already had many books that had been very, very successful. And so NBC contacted her pretty soon and asked her paid her for the rights to do a miniseries. So I believe it's going to be broadcast in this coming March. This is a murder mystery, or is it?
Or is it? What's the title of it?
Apples Never Fall.
Apples
Never Fall. And there
Isaac Newton would argue.
Indeed. Apples are a kind of a theme in this book. And it's kind of, you think apples never fall far from the tree, or do they? And, questions like that. So it begins with a family, the Delaney's, Joy and Stan, who are freshly retired or fairly freshly retired. They're the parents of 4 adult children. Joy and Stan have run an actually famous tennis training program through which they have trained some tennis players who are very well known, very successful from various parts of the world. So they've done a great thing. All 4 of their children were trained to be actually tennis stars or champs. None of them achieved that, and there are various reasons for that. So the plot thickens when Joy, the mother, goes out on a bicycle ride and never returns. Oh. And it is assumed at some point, when they never hear anything, there's no ransom note, there's no information from her, they assume that she's been murdered. So there's a murder investigation. The first suspect is Stan, her husband, who is kind of a volatile character with a temper. But then other suspects slowly emerge. And the story takes some interesting twists and turns. Turns out that by the end, you're not sure what the crime was or who the perpetrator was. But at any rate, I'm getting too close to telling you too much. But it's an interesting study. It is really more of a family drama than anything.
Okay.
So often those who love books, myself among them, think the book is better than the movie or the miniseries.
Always, in my opinion.
Will you watch the miniseries?
Probably not.
Okay.
Don't even mess with it.
I've already read the story.
Sure.
So
you know what's going to happen.
You read the best version.
I know. And, I thought A Man Called Uwe was pretty good, although I was not convinced that Tom Hanks could really play a grumpy old man.
And
but
yet,
he did very well.
He did.
He did very well.
It was because of the cat.
Of course. Of course. I still love the book better than the movie.
I love the book.
Yep.
I love the book. Okay, we have come to our last book on the list. Who's excited? I know our lovely producers are. They're like, this may be your favorite. It's not ours. Okay, last book. So I threw in a bonus nonfiction. I don't read a lot of nonfiction, but I read one. I really thought it was outstanding, so I put it on the list. It is called Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus by Nabeel Quereshi. And hopefully I pronounced that correct. I looked it up on the internet. But I totally recommend listening to this book because the author reads it. And I always think it's excellent when the author reads it. Even if they're not a gifted narrator, they just emphasize things that they really want emphasized. So Nabeel was brought up in a Muslim American home and was a devoted follower of this religion. When he entered college, he met a man named David Wood, who was a devoted Christian, and they became friends. And they regularly debated about each other's faith. And it started with Christianity, which David was able to make a convincing case for. And then they proceeded to debate Islam, which Nabeel really couldn't make a good case for. And he is a very educated guy. Like that, I think that was my favorite part. Like they both respected each other so much that they weren't mean about it, but they really discussed and debated. So we know from the title where this book will end up, because Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus. So as the book moved along, I became increasingly apprehensive just because he was so close to his Muslim family, and you knew what this was going to do to that family. and such loving parents. And I really loved the window this book provided into a loving Muslim family. And this was one of the most gripping parts of the book. So it was eye-opening, inspirational, and I would definitely recommend it as a nonfiction read. It's really good.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it was well worth it. All right, so that concludes the Youse, Burt, Matz book list for 2024. It has a nice ring to it. I have to keep that going. All right, so we will post the list along with the podcast, so you guys can mark any of these that you'd like to read. And thank you so much for joining us. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
For coming on to the podcast.
For the invitation.
It's a pleasure. We probably could have made this last for like a mini series,
Hours.
probably.
I have questions for both of you afterwards.
There's going to be an
sure.
after show.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for following us. Welcome to our first podcast of 2024. There'll be much more to come. I'm excited to see where the Lord is going to take us this year. So please take care, and thank you for joining.